Emily Carter stepped off the plane in Guangdong Province, China, feeling both excited and nervous. Her heart raced as she adjusted the strap of her bag on her shoulder. This was her first big assignment as a journalist, and it could make or break her career. Her editor had sent her here to investigate Tao Farm, one of the largest snake breeding facilities in the world. The farm bred millions of snakes every year for their skin and meat, but there were rumors of something darker happening behind its gates. As she walked through the airport, Emily couldn't help but think about how different everything looked compared to home. The signs were written in characters she didn't understand, and the air smelled unfamiliar, sharp and humid. Outside, the heat hit her like a wall. She wiped sweat from her forehead and scanned the crowd for David Riley, the photographer who would be working with her. He wasn't hard to spot. With his scruffy beard and camera slung around his neck, he stood out among the sea of people. "Emily!" David called out, waving at her. His voice carried over the noise of the bustling terminal. She smiled and hurried toward him, glad to see a familiar face. "You made it," he said, shaking her hand firmly. "Ready to dive into this story?" "As ready as I'll ever be," Emily replied. "But honestly, I'm not sure what we're walking into." David nodded. "Neither am I. That's why we're here, to find out." They climbed into a taxi that took them to their hotel near the outskirts of the city. From there, they planned to visit Tao Farm early the next morning. As they drove, Emily stared out the window at the passing scenery. Fields stretched endlessly, dotted with small villages and clusters of trees. It all seemed so peaceful, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something sinister lay ahead. The next day, Emily and David arrived at Tao Farm just after sunrise. The entrance was marked by a tall metal gate with the company logo, a coiled snake, painted on it in bold, red letters. A man in a crisp business suit greeted them warmly. His name tag read Mr. Lin, and he introduced himself as the manager of the facility. "Welcome to Tao Farm," Mr. Lin said, bowing slightly. "We are honored to have you here. Please follow me." He led them inside, where the smell of damp earth and musk filled the air. Rows of enclosures lined either side of a narrow path, each filled with snakes of various sizes and colors. Some slithered lazily across rocks, while others coiled tightly, watching the visitors with unblinking eyes. Emily pulled out her notebook and began jotting down observations, trying to focus on the details despite the discomfort creeping up her spine. "This way," Mr. Lin said, motioning for them to follow him deeper into the facility. "Let me show you our breeding area." As they walked, Emily noticed strange symbols painted on the walls of some enclosures. They looked ancient, almost tribal, and completely out of place in such a modern setting. She pointed them out to David, who snapped a quick photo before Mr. Lin turned back to address them. "These symbols are part of our tradition," Mr. Lin explained smoothly. "They represent prosperity and good fortune. We believe they help ensure healthy breeding." Emily nodded politely, though she wasn't convinced. Something about the explanation felt rehearsed, like he'd given it many times before. She decided to press him further. "That's fascinating," she said. "Do these traditions affect the way you care for the snakes?" Mr. Lin hesitated for a moment, then smiled. "Of course. Tradition guides everything we do here, but rest assured, we also use the latest technology to maintain high standards." Despite his assurances, Emily sensed that he was hiding something. Every time she asked a question about animal welfare or the purpose of certain practices, he deflected with vague answers or changed the subject entirely. Still, she continued taking notes, determined to piece together the truth. Later, they reached a large warehouse-like building where workers sorted freshly harvested snake skins. The sight was overwhelming. Piles of glistening scales reflected the harsh fluorescent lights, and the smell of blood hung heavy in the air. Emily felt her stomach churn but forced herself to stay focused. These images would be crucial for her report. David moved quietly beside her, capturing photos from every angle. His camera clicked steadily, documenting the grim reality of the operation. At one point, he leaned close to whisper in her ear. "This doesn't feel right," he murmured. "There's something off about this place." "I know," Emily whispered back. "But we need proof. Keep shooting." After hours of touring the facility, Mr. Lin finally invited them to sit down for tea in his office. The room was surprisingly cozy, decorated with paintings of serene landscapes and shelves lined with books. Yet even here, Emily couldn't relax. Her mind kept returning to those strange symbols and the evasive responses she'd received earlier. "Miss Carter," Mr. Lin said, pouring tea into delicate porcelain cups, "I hope you found your visit informative. Is there anything else you'd like to see?" Emily sipped her tea carefully, choosing her words with precision. "Actually, yes, I'd like to learn more about the workers. What kind of training do they receive? And how do they handle safety concerns?" Mr. Lin chuckled lightly, though his expression remained guarded. "Our workers are highly skilled professionals. Safety is our top priority, but perhaps tomorrow you can speak with some of them directly. For now, I must attend to other matters." With that, he excused himself, leaving Emily and David alone in the office. As soon as he was gone, David leaned forward, his brow furrowed. "What do you think?" he asked. "Something's definitely fishy here." "I agree," Emily said. "But we need to dig deeper. Tomorrow, let's try to talk to the workers ourselves. Maybe someone will slip up." That night, back at their hotel, Emily reviewed her notes while David uploaded the photos he'd taken. The more she thought about the day's events, the more uneasy she felt. There was no denying that Tao Farm operated on a massive scale, but the secrecy surrounding its methods raised red flags. What were they really doing with all those snakes? And why did those symbols seem so important? Little did Emily know, the answers to her questions were far stranger and far more dangerous than she could have imagined. That night, Emily couldn't sleep. Her mind kept replaying everything she had seen at Tao Farm during the day: the snakes, the workers, the strange symbols, and Mr. Lin's evasive answers. Something about the place didn't sit right with her. It wasn't just the scale of the operation or the smell of blood that lingered in her nose. It was deeper than that. There was an uneasiness in the air, like a secret waiting to be uncovered. She glanced at the clock. It was past midnight, but she knew she wouldn't rest until she found out more. Quietly, she slipped out of bed and grabbed her notebook and flashlight. David was asleep in the other room, snoring softly. She hesitated for a moment, wondering if she should wake him up, but decided against it. If she got caught sneaking back into the farm, she didn't want to drag him into trouble too. The drive back to Tao Farm felt surreal. The roads were empty, and the only sound was the hum of the car engine. When she arrived, the gate was locked, but she spotted a smaller side entrance left slightly ajar. Taking a deep breath, she pushed it open and stepped inside. The farm looked completely different at night. During the day, it had been noisy and chaotic, filled with the sounds of workers and machinery. But now, it was eerily silent. The only noise came from the occasional hiss of a snake or the rustle of leaves in the wind. Emily turned on her flashlight and began walking down the narrow path between the enclosures. As she moved deeper into the facility, she noticed something odd. Faint whispers seemed to float through the air, almost like voices speaking in a language she couldn't understand. At first, she thought it might be her imagination playing tricks on her, but the whispers grew louder the farther she went. They weren't coming from any specific direction. They surrounded her, filling the space with an unsettling presence. Her heart pounded as she shone her flashlight around, searching for the source of the sound. That's when she saw them again. The strange symbols painted on the walls. In the darkness, they glowed faintly, pulsing with a soft, unnatural light. Emily froze, her breath catching in her throat. This wasn't normal. Nothing about this place was normal. Suddenly, she heard footsteps behind her. Spinning around, she saw a shadowy figure standing near one of the enclosures. It was human-shaped but hard to make out clearly in the dim light. Before she could react, the figure turned and disappeared into the shadows. "Hello?" Emily called out, her voice trembling. "Who's there?" There was no response, only the sound of silence pressing down on her. She debated whether to follow the figure or turn back, but her curiosity won out. Clutching her flashlight tightly, she crept forward, careful not to make a sound. Eventually, she reached an area she hadn't seen during the day, a large open courtyard surrounded by tall buildings. In the center of the courtyard, several workers stood in a circle, their backs to her. They wore dark robes instead of the usual protective gear, and candles flickered at their feet, casting long, distorted shadows on the ground. Emily ducked behind a pile of crates to watch without being seen. What happened next made her blood run cold. One of the workers held up a live snake, its body writhing violently in his hands. He began chanting in a low, rhythmic voice, and the others joined in. Their words sounded ancient and guttural, unlike anything Emily had ever heard. The snake twisted unnaturally, as if trying to escape some invisible force pulling at its body. Then, something even stranger occurred. As the chanting grew louder, the snake's movements became jerky and unnatural, almost mechanical. Its eyes glowed red for a brief moment before it went still entirely. The workers lowered the snake gently onto the ground and stepped back, bowing, their heads in reverence. Emily's mind raced. What had she just witnessed? Was this some kind of ritual? And what did it have to do with the snakes bred at Teo Farm? She wanted to stay longer and gather more information, but fear gripped her. If they caught her spying, she didn't know what would happen. Carefully, she retraced her steps, keeping to the shadows as much as possible. Just as she reached the side entrance, she spotted something lying on the ground, a small glass vial, containing a glowing green liquid. Without thinking, she picked it up and tucked it into her pocket. Whatever it was, it might be important later. Back at the hotel, Emily burst into David's room, waking him up. He sat up groggily, rubbing his eyes. "What's wrong?" he asked, his voice heavy with sleep. "We need to talk," Emily said urgently. She recounted everything she had seen at the farm, describing the glowing symbols, the mysterious figure, and the bizarre ritual involving the snake. David listened intently, his expression growing darker with each word. "This is insane," he muttered when she finished. "Are you sure you weren't dreaming?" "I'm positive," Emily replied. "Look." She pulled the vial out of her pocket and handed it to him. "I found this near where they were doing whatever it was." David examined the vial closely. The liquid inside shimmered faintly, giving off an otherworldly glow. He frowned. "This doesn't look like anything natural. What do you think?" "It is? I don't know," Emily admitted. "But I think it's connected to what's going on at the farm. We need to find out more." Over the next hour, they discussed their plan of action. They agreed that sneaking back into the farm alone was too risky, so they decided to investigate further during the day, while pretending to continue their tour. Meanwhile, Emily would try to research the symbols and the language used in the ritual online, hoping to uncover clues about their meaning. Before heading back to bed, Emily stared at the vial once more. Something about it gave her chills, but she couldn't explain why. Whatever secrets Tao Farm was hiding, she was determined to expose them, even if it meant putting herself in danger. As she drifted off to sleep, the image of the glowing symbols and the unnatural movements of the snake haunted her dreams. Little did she know those images were just the beginning of a much larger mystery, one that would challenge everything she thought she knew about science, ethics, and the boundaries of nature itself. The next morning, Emily woke up early, her mind buzzing with questions about the glowing green vial she had found at Teo Farm. She couldn't shake the feeling that it held the key to understanding what was really going on at the facility. Sitting at the small desk in their hotel room, she carefully placed the vial under a portable microscope David had brought along for the trip. The two of them worked quietly, trying not to disturb the other guests. "What do you see?" David asked, leaning over her shoulder as she adjusted the lens. "It's weird," Emily replied, squinting through the eyepiece. "It looks organic, like some kind of liquid protein or enzyme, but there's something else mixed in. It doesn't match anything I've studied before." David frowned. "Do you think it could be part of whatever they're using in those rituals?" "Maybe," Emily said thoughtfully. "But why would they need something like this? And what does it have to do with the snakes?" While Emily continued examining the vial, David turned his attention to the photos he had taken during their visit to the farm. He scrolled through them on his laptop, zooming in on certain details. Suddenly he stopped and pointed at one image. "Look at this," he said, turning the screen toward Emily. In the photo, a blurred figure stood near one of the snake enclosures. Its shape was humanoid, but its features were indistinct, almost ghostly. What made it even stranger was the way it seemed to blend into the background as if it wasn't entirely solid. Emily stared at the picture, her heart sinking. "That's the same figure I saw last night," she whispered. "Who or what is it?" They spent the next hour discussing possibilities, but neither of them could come up with a logical explanation. Determined to find answers, Emily decided to dig deeper into the history of Tao Farm. Using her laptop, she searched online for any information she could find about the facility and its operations. At first, most of the results were predictable: articles praising the farm's efficiency and contributions to the luxury goods industry. But as she dug further, she stumbled upon something far more disturbing. Several old news reports mentioned mysterious disappearances in villages near the farm over the past decade. Locals claimed that people who ventured too close to Tao Farm never returned. One article caught her attention. It quoted an elderly woman named May, who lived in a village just outside Guangdong province. According to May, the villagers believed the farm wasn't just breeding snakes, it was harvesting something far more sinister. She referred to ancient legends about spirits trapped inside animals, warning that anyone who tampered with such forces risked unleashing chaos. "This has to be connected," Emily said, showing the article to David. "These stories might sound crazy, but they line up with what we've seen so far. The symbols, the rituals, the glowing vial. Something unnatural is happening at that farm." David nodded slowly. "If these legends are true, then maybe the farm isn't just experimenting with snakes. Maybe they're trying to combine science with something else." Their conversation was interrupted by a knock at the door. Startled, they exchanged nervous glances. No one knew they were investigating the farm beyond their editor back home. Cautiously, David opened the door a crack. To their relief, it was the hotel manager holding a package. "This arrived for you," he said, handing it over. "It's marked urgent." Once the manager left, Emily tore open the package. Inside was a USB drive and a handwritten note. "You're asking the wrong questions. Watch this." Her hands trembled as she plugged the drive into her laptop. A video file appeared on the screen, and they clicked play. The footage was grainy and shaky, clearly recorded on a hidden camera. It showed workers in lab coats moving through a restricted section of the farm. They carried trays filled with test tubes containing liquids similar to the one Emily had found. In one scene, a scientist injected a snake with a glowing substance. The snake convulsed violently, its body twisting in ways that defied biology. Then its skin began to split open, revealing something beneath, a grotesque hybrid creature with scales, fur, and claw-like appendages. Emily gasped, covering her mouth with her hand. What is that thing?" "I don't know," David said grimly. "But it's not natural." As the video ended, a text message popped up on Emily's phone. It was from an unknown number. "Be careful. They're watching." Fear gripped her chest. Whoever sent the package knew they were poking around, and they wanted to warn them. But why? Were they allies, or was this some kind of trap? "We can't ignore this," Emily said firmly, despite her growing unease. "We have to go back to the farm and find out more." David hesitated. "Are you sure? If someone's watching us, sneaking around again might not be safe." "I know it's risky," she admitted. "But we're close. We can't stop now." After a long discussion, they agreed on a plan. During their next official visit to the farm, they would pretend to focus on routine interviews with workers, while secretly gathering evidence. To avoid suspicion, they needed to act normal and stick together. Armed with their newfound knowledge, they hoped to uncover the truth behind the horrifying experiments hinted at in the video. Later that afternoon, they returned to Tao Farm for another tour. This time, Mr. Lin greeted them with a forced smile, his usual charm replaced by a subtle tension. He led them to a group of workers sorting snakeskins in a large warehouse. Emily approached one of the women, introducing herself and striking up a casual conversation. How long have you worked here? Emily asked, jotting notes in her notebook. 5 years, the woman replied curtly, avoiding eye contact. That must be difficult work, Emily pressed gently. Have you ever seen anything unusual happen around here? Anything that seems out of the ordinary? The woman glanced nervously at Mr. Lin, who was standing nearby. I don't know what you mean, she muttered quickly before walking away. Frustrated but undeterred, Emily tried speaking with others, but no one seemed willing to talk. Just as she was about to give up, an older man approached her. His face was weathered, and his hands bore countless scars from years of handling snakes. You're asking dangerous questions, he said in a low voice. If you value your life, leave this place. Before Emily could respond, Mr. Lin stepped in, ushering the man away. Please excuse him, Mr. Lin said smoothly. He's been working too hard lately. Now, shall we continue the tour? Emily nodded, though her mind raced. The man's warning only strengthened her resolve. Whatever secrets Tao Farm was hiding, they were worth risking everything to expose. Back at the hotel that evening, Emily and David reviewed their findings. Between the strange vial, the cryptic video, and the workers' reactions, they were piecing together a disturbing puzzle. Yet the biggest question remained unanswered. What exactly was Tao Farm creating, and what did it mean for the world? As Emily stared at the glowing liquid under the microscope once more, she realized they were dealing with something far beyond human understanding. The truth was closer than ever, but so was the danger. The next day, Emily and David put their plan into action. They had decided to go undercover as laborers at Tao Farm to get closer to the truth. Early in the morning, they dressed in old clothes they bought from a local market, making sure they looked like ordinary workers. With fake IDs created using photos and basic information, they joined a group of new hires entering the facility. As they stepped inside, Emily felt her nerves tighten. This was far riskier than anything they had done before. If they were caught snooping around restricted areas, there was no telling what might happen. But she reminded herself why they were here: to expose the horrifying experiments happening behind closed doors. Their first task was simple: sorting snakeskins in one of the warehouses. It was tedious work, but it allowed them to observe the daily operations up close. Workers moved quietly, avoiding eye contact and speaking only when necessary. The air was heavy with tension, and Emily noticed that many of them seemed scared, glancing over their shoulders or flinching at sudden noises. During a break, David struck up a conversation with another worker, a young man named Wei. He spoke broken English but was eager to practice. How long have you worked here? David asked casually. 2 years, Wei replied, wiping sweat from his brow. Not easy job. Emily joined in, trying to sound casual. Do you ever work in other parts of the farm? Like the labs? Wei's expression darkened, and he glanced around nervously. No. No one goes there unless told. Bad place. Why bad? Emily pressed gently. Before Wei could answer, a supervisor approached, barking orders in Chinese. The workers scattered quickly, leaving Emily and David alone. They exchanged worried glances but knew better than to push further. For now, they would have to focus on gathering information another way. Later that evening, after their shift ended, Emily and David waited until the farm grew quiet. Under the cover of darkness, they slipped into a restricted section of the facility. Using a map they had pieced together from earlier observations, they navigated through narrow hallways lined with locked doors. Finally, they reached a room, marked with the same strange symbols Emily had seen before. Inside, they found rows of computers and scientific equipment. Papers were scattered across tables, detailing experiments involving snake DNA. As Emily sifted through the documents, her stomach churned. The notes described attempts to combine snake genetics with other elements, things that didn't belong in nature. One file mentioned creating hybrids capable of surviving extreme conditions such as intense heat or radiation. This is insane, David whispered, reading over her shoulder. They're playing God. Emily nodded grimly. And it looks like they've succeeded, at least partially. She pointed to a photograph attached to one of the reports. It showed a creature unlike anything they had ever seen, a grotesque mix of snake, lizard, and something else entirely. Its eyes glowed eerily, and its body was covered in patches of fur and scales. Beneath the image, a caption read, Subject 17. Enhanced survival capabilities confirmed. Instability remains unresolved. David snapped photos of the documents and files, knowing they needed evidence to back up their story. But as they continued exploring, they discovered something even more alarming. In a nearby room, rows of glass tanks housed living specimens of these hybrid creatures. Some slithered lazily, while others twitched violently, as if struggling against invisible restraints. One tank caught Emily's attention. Inside was a creature that seemed almost human-like, in shape, with elongated limbs and a face that resembled a distorted mask. Its eyes locked onto hers, and for a moment she felt an overwhelming sense of dread, as if it could see straight into her soul. "We need to leave," David said urgently, tugging at her arm. "Now." But just as they turned to go, the lights flickered, plunging the room into darkness. Panic set in as they heard footsteps approaching rapidly. Someone, or something, was coming. Heart pounding, Emily grabbed David's hand, and they darted toward the exit. The corridors twisted and turned, disorienting them in the dim light. Behind them, the sound of pursuit grew louder. Whatever was chasing them wasn't human. It moved too fast, too silently. Finally, they burst through a door and found themselves outside, surrounded by rows of snake enclosures. Gasping for breath, they ducked behind a stack of crates, hoping to stay hidden. Moments later, a figure emerged from the building, a tall, shadowy shape with glowing red eyes. It paused, scanning the area, then let out a low hiss before retreating into the darkness. "What was that?" David whispered, his voice trembling. "I don't know," Emily replied, clutching the vial tightly in her pocket. "But we can't stay here any longer." They ran back to the hotel, adrenaline coursing through their veins. Once safely inside their room, they collapsed onto the bed, exhausted but alive. David began uploading the photos and documents they had gathered, while Emily stared blankly at the wall. Replay other. After escaping the restricted area of TAO Farm, Emily and David knew they were running out of time. Whatever they had seen, and whatever was chasing them, was proof that the farm's experiments had gone horribly wrong. They couldn't stay in the hotel or risk going back to the facility during the day. Instead, they decided to leave immediately, taking the evidence they had gathered with them. But getting away wouldn't be easy. As they packed their belongings, Emily examined the documents and photos they had collected. Among the files was a detailed report about the glowing green liquid she had found in the vial. According to the notes, it was a biological compound designed to destabilize unnatural genetic combinations. Essentially, it could reverse the effects of the mutations created by the farm's experiments. "This might be our only chance," Emily said, holding up the vial. "If we can use this on those hybrids, maybe we can stop them." David nodded, though his face was pale. "How do you plan to pull that off? We're not exactly armed." "We'll improvise," Emily replied firmly. She rummaged through her bag and pulled out a small spray bottle, some tubing, and duct tape. With David's help, she rigged together a crude dispersal device. It wasn't perfect, but it would have to work. They left the hotel under the cover of darkness, heading toward the edge of the jungle near Tao Farm. Their plan was simple: find a safe place to hide, analyze the hybrid's behavior, and figure out how to use the vial effectively. But as they moved deeper into the forest, they realized they weren't alone. At first, it was just a sound, a low hiss cutting through the silence. Then came the rustling of leaves, growing louder and closer. Emily shone her flashlight into the trees, revealing glowing red eyes watching them from the shadows. The hybrids were tracking them. "Keep moving," David urged, gripping his camera tightly. He snapped a few quick photos, hoping to document the creatures before they attacked. The hybrids moved unnaturally fast, weaving between trees with predatory precision. One lunged at them, its jaws snapping shut inches from Emily's arm. She stumbled backward, nearly dropping the makeshift dispersal device. David swung his flashlight like a weapon, temporarily blinding the creature and giving them a moment to escape. "We need to lead them into an open space," Emily panted as they ran. "Somewhere we can fight back without being surrounded." They reached a clearing bathed in moonlight, its ground covered in thick moss and fallen leaves. Behind them, the hybrids emerged from the trees, circling slowly. There were 3 of them, each more grotesque than the last. Their movements were jerky yet deliberate, as if driven by an intelligence beyond instinct. Emily steadied herself, clutching the dispersal device in both hands. "David, get ready to distract them." David nodded, stepping forward with his flashlight. He waved it wildly, shouting to draw the hybrid's attention. 2 of them turned toward him, leaving the third focused on Emily. Taking a deep breath, she aimed the nozzle of the device at the nearest creature and squeezed the trigger. A fine mist sprayed into the air, enveloping the hybrid in a glowing green cloud. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the creature let out a piercing shriek, convulsing violently. Its body twisted and contorted, shedding patches of fur and scales until it collapsed lifeless onto the ground. "It works!" Emily shouted, relief flooding her voice. But there was no time to celebrate. The remaining hybrids charged at her, their glowing eyes filled with rage. David threw rocks and sticks at the creatures, trying to keep them distracted. Meanwhile, Emily adjusted the device, aiming carefully at the second hybrid. Another burst of the liquid hit its mark, causing the creature to writhe in agony before falling still. Only one hybrid remained. It lunged at Emily, knocking the dispersal device from her hands. Panic surged through her as she scrambled to retrieve it, but the creature was too close. Just as it opened its jaws to strike, David leapt forward, swinging his camera like a club. The blow stunned the hybrid long enough for Emily to grab the device and spray it directly in the face. The final creature collapsed, joining the others in death. Breathing heavily, Emily and David stared at the carnage around them. The clearing was eerily silent save for the sound of their labored breathing. "We did it," David said weakly, sinking to the ground. "We stopped them." But their victory came at a cost. During the fight, David had been bitten. A set of puncture wounds marked his forearm, oozing dark venom. Even in the dim light, Emily could see the skin around the bite turning black. "Oh, no," she whispered, kneeling beside him. "David, are you okay?" He forced a smile, though his face was pale and sweaty. "I'll be fine. Just don't let me slow you down." Emily tore a strip of fabric from her shirt and tied it tightly above the wound to slow the spread of venom. "We need to get you to a hospital. Now." With great effort, she helped David to his feet, supporting him as they made their way back, toward the road. Every step felt like a battle, but she refused to give up. David had risked everything to help her uncover the truth, and she wasn't going to lose him now. As dawn broke over the horizon, they finally reached the edge of the jungle. A passing truck driver spotted them and offered to take them to the nearest town. Emily thanked him gratefully, cradling David protectively as they drove away. Hours later, David lay in a hospital bed, hooked up to machines monitoring his vital signs. The doctors were doing everything they could to counteract the venom, but the prognosis was uncertain. Emily sat by his side, holding his hand and replaying the events of the night in her mind. She thought about the hybrids, the strange symbols, and the horrifying experiments conducted at Tao Farm. Despite the danger, she knew she couldn't stop here. The world needed to know what was happening at that facility. The lives lost, the ethics ignored, the line between science and madness crossed. By the next morning, Emily had uploaded the evidence to a secure server and sent it to her editor. Within days, her article exposing Tao Farm went viral, sparking outrage and calls for international investigations. Governments and organizations demanded answers, forcing the farm to shut down indefinitely. But even as the story unfolded, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that the nightmare wasn't over. Late one night, as she packed her bags to return home, she noticed something odd outside her window. A long, sinuous shape slithered across the ground, disappearing into the darkness. Her heart raced as she realized the hybrids might not all be dead. Whatever secrets Tao Farm had unleashed, they were still out there, waiting, watching, and ready to strike again. Weeks passed after Emily returned home from China. Her article exposing Tao Farm had made headlines around the world. Governments launched investigations, activists protested, and people demanded answers about the farm's unethical practices. For a while, it seemed like justice might finally be served. But for Emily, life felt far from peaceful. She couldn't shake the memories of what she had seen, the strange symbols, the hybrid creatures, and the horrifying experiments. Most of all, she couldn't stop thinking about David. Though he survived the venomous bite thanks to emergency treatment, his health never fully recovered. He remained weak and bedridden, unable to return to work or live a normal life. Every evening, Emily sat alone in her small apartment, surrounded by piles of research and photographs. She stared at a picture of David taken during happier times, a candid shot of him laughing as he adjusted his camera lens. It was a reminder of how much they had sacrificed to uncover the truth. One night, as rain poured outside, Emily heard a noise coming from her living room. At first, she thought it was just the wind rattling the windows. But when she turned off her laptop and listened carefully, she realized the sound was closer, almost like something sliding across the floor. Her heart raced as she grabbed a flashlight and slowly walked toward the source of the noise. When she reached the living room, she froze. On the wall opposite the window, a long, sinuous shadow moved silently, twisting and curling like a living thing. Its glowing red eyes reflected faintly in the beam of her flashlight. "No," Emily whispered, backing away. "This can't be happening." The shadow disappeared as quickly as it appeared, leaving behind an eerie silence. Emily stood there, trembling, unsure if what she saw was real or just a trick of her tired mind. But deep down she knew it wasn't over. Whatever secrets Tao Farm had unleashed were still out there, lurking in the shadows. The next morning, Emily called David to tell him what she had seen. His voice sounded weaker than usual, but he listened intently. "Are you sure it wasn't just your imagination?" he asked gently. "I don't know," Emily admitted. "But I can't ignore. It's something still wrong." David sighed heavily. "Be careful, Emily. You've done enough. Don't let this consume you." She promised him she would stay safe, though she didn't believe her own words. Later that day, she dug through the files she had saved from Tao Farm, searching for anything she might have missed. One document caught her attention, a map of underground tunnels connected to the facility. According to the notes, these tunnels were used to transport experimental subjects away from the main building. Could the hybrids have escaped through those tunnels? And if so, where did they go? Determined to find answers, Emily booked a flight back to Guangdong province. This time she went alone. The journey felt heavier without David by her side, but she knew she had no choice. If the hybrids were still alive, they posed a threat not just to her but to everyone. When she arrived, the area around Tao Farm looked abandoned. The gates were locked and warning signs lined the perimeter. But Emily found an entrance hidden among the trees, a narrow path leading to one of the underground tunnel entrances mentioned in the map. Inside the tunnels, the air was damp and cold, carrying the faint smell of earth and decay. Emily moved cautiously, her flashlight cutting through the darkness. The walls were lined with pipes and wires, and strange symbols similar to the ones she had seen before were painted sporadically along the way. After walking for what felt like hours, she reached a large chamber filled with broken equipment and shattered glass tanks. It looked like someone or something had destroyed the place intentionally. In the center of the room lay the remains of several hybrid creatures, their bodies decomposing and covered in moss. But then, she noticed movement in the corner of the chamber. A single hybrid, smaller than the others, slithered toward her. Its movements were slow and labored, as if it was injured. Emily raised her flashlight, preparing to defend herself, but the creature stopped a few feet away, staring at her with glowing red eyes. For a moment, they simply watched each other. Then the hybrid opened its mouth and let out a low hiss, not aggressive but almost mournful. Emily hesitated, lowering her flashlight slightly. "What are you trying to tell me?" she murmured. As if in response, the creature turned and crawled, deeper into the chamber, stopping near a pile of debris. Emily followed cautiously and began clearing away the rubble. Beneath it, she found a journal belonging to one of the scientists who had worked at Teo Farm. The pages were torn and water-damaged, but some entries were still legible. In the journal, the scientist described the true purpose of the experiments: to create beings capable of surviving environmental disasters caused by human activity. But the project spiraled out of control when the hybrids developed intelligence and instincts beyond prediction. Some even displayed traits resembling human emotions: fear, anger, and possibly even grief. The final entry read, "We have created monsters, but perhaps we are the real monsters. These creatures deserve more than our cruelty. They deserve freedom." Tears welled up in Emily's eyes as she closed the journal. She realized now that the hybrids weren't just mindless beasts. They were victims of humanity's greed and hubris. The small hybrid in front of her hissed softly again, then turned and disappeared into the shadows. Emily left the tunnels feeling conflicted. She had uncovered the truth, but it wasn't the clear-cut victory she had hoped for. The hybrids were still out there, hiding in the wilderness, adapting to survive. And while the world condemned Teo Farm, the ethical questions raised by its experiments lingered unanswered. Back home, Emily published a follow-up article detailing her findings in the tunnels. She included photos of the journal and described her encounter with the last hybrid, urging readers to consider the moral implications of genetic experimentation. The response was mixed. Some praised her bravery, while others dismissed her claims as sensationalism. Late one night, as she sat by her window staring at the city skyline, Emily spotted another shadow moving across the wall. This time, she didn't panic. Instead, she smiled faintly, knowing that the hybrids were survivors just like her. Whatever the future held, she was ready to face it.